Welcome. My name's Jason. It's Wednesday night against the stream. Got some folks in the house and those of you on the Zooms. Glad you're here. Yeah, we meet every Wednesday at 7:30 Pacific Standard Time. You can, you guys know, but the people in the YouTube world, you can register it against the stream for any of the Zoom classes that we have. Also, you're welcome to come in person. We have socially distanced and we try to be as responsible as possible. So there's that. And what else was I thinking? Yeah, just letting a few more people in. Oh, so tonight I'm going to continue. I kind of started a series last week, sex, drugs, and money. And I'm going to continue with some of that, and which is, maybe a clever way of just talking about the precepts and some of the challenges that we maybe face around sex, drugs, and money, and living in the lay life, or living in the world of things, so to speak. So we'll start with some meditation. So feel free to find a posture or position that's workable, that's sustainable, where you can feel both relaxed and alert. If there's anyone new to meditation, there's not much to it. You do the best you can to try to keep your attention on the object of meditation. And when it wanders off, try not to beat yourself up, because it's just the mind doing what the mind does and what it does all day long. Sometimes there's this strange expectation that, I'm going to take 20 minutes or 30 minutes out of my day, and I expect my mind to just obey and do exactly what I want it to do and stay focused precisely on the breath or the body, or the repeated phrase or loving kindness phrases. And when it doesn't obey or it doesn't do that, then there's some kind of criticism usually, or some kind of judgment, or some kind of doubt whether or not this is going to work or whether it's helpful. So my invitation to you is to let go of any of that judgment, any of that criticism, and just do the best you can to stay here as present as possible, and know that all things change. So it's helpful to allow the eyes to close, although it's not necessary. If you feel like you want to leave keep your eyes open and just allow them to be downcast, that's okay too. It's all right to have your eyes be averted. And then making any subtle adjustments. It's also a good idea to not kind of slump your back, but to allow the back to be but both straight but not rigid. Sometimes it's helpful to think of the point on the top of your head rising up towards the ceiling or the sky. And just settling in. Taking a few of those deeper breaths, intentional breaths, maybe a 4-count inhale, 6-count exhale. Opening up to the comings and goings of sound. Sounds outside the room. Sounds inside the room. Just taking a moment and sending some gratitude towards yourself, some gratitude for showing up for this practice, for this class, showing up for yourself. Aiming the attention in some way towards this experience of breathing, whether the aim is towards the tip of the nose or the rise and fall of the belly, connecting with some experience of the breath in the body. And then sustaining that connection, that awareness for as long as possible. Knowing that the attention may wander off and that that's not a problem. Whenever we recognize that the attention does wander off to the future or the past, with as much loving kindness or compassion as possible, just aiming the attention back, breathing in. Know that you're breathing in, breathing out. Know that you're breathing out. Becoming curious. What's this breath like? Can I notice the coolness on the inhale, the warmth on the exhale? The rise and fall of the belly. The pause at the beginning or the end of each breath. Sometimes it's helpful to give the mind a job. So gently using some simple phrase, breathing in, breathing out. Or perhaps on the in breath, calm, and on the out breath, relax. Recognizing whenever the attention wanders off, just taking a moment to acknowledge where it's gone, future or past, history or mystery, some story, some memory, some plan. And then simply with a sense of friendliness or kindness, aiming the attention back, connecting with the experience of breathing, and then sustaining that connection with as much openness and curiosity as possible. allowing the breath to be a doorway into understanding or realizing impermanence. Each breath is born, lives for a time, and passes away. A beginning, middle, and end. Like all things. The invitation is to become curious of this process: birth, life, death, again and again. Perhaps the mind begins to calm, the attention a little more refined. The invitation is to open to the receptivity of the sense doors, sounds and smells and taste and touch, even the sense door of the mind, perception. Is there a subtle feeling tone of pleasant, unpleasant, or neither? It's not something we're looking for. Staying connected to the breath, the experience of breathing, and just opening, broadening, becoming more receptive to the subtle energy of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral within each moment. Thoughts, sounds, sensations, all opportunities to sharpen our awareness of the feeling tone. Seeing the changingness of thoughts, feelings, sensations, sounds, even the breath, subtle shifts from moment to moment. Seatbelt sign is turned off. Feel free to move about the cabin. So before I get into the topic for the evening, just we'll open up for questions. Any thoughts in regards to the instruction? Believe it or not, it might seem random, but I try to stick with themes within my meditation instructions. Maybe that's apparent, maybe it's not apparent, but I am interested in whether or not there was a theme for you during the meditation, whether the instructions are helpful or clear, or are you just doing battle with your thoughts the whole time, which is also okay if that's the case. So anyway, just I'll open up for any questions either in the room or on the Zoom. And if you're on Zoom, you can just like raise the little, I don't even think the hand is blue anymore. I think it's a yellow hand now, like a Simpsons hand instead of a Smurf hand. And you can find that within the participants or the chat. Is it in the chat? Yeah, in the chat.
It's in the participants and it's blue on mine.
Okay, all right.
My name's Mark. Hello, everyone. I want to thank you. It's a good meditation. I keep getting lost in these little fantasies. All of a sudden, I'm thinking about something and I notice it when I'm thinking about it. My head has it. If I'm thinking about, if I'm turning my head to look at something, I notice that I'm doing that while I'm meditating too. It's kind of weird because and then I catch myself, wait a minute, straighten back up and bring myself back to where I'm at, But
Yeah.
It's really weird because I think it's like and we've talked about it before, it's kind of like a half dream state. I kind of like in between this meditative state and a dream state. I don't know that it's not the same thing, meditating, I'm aware of what's going on, I'm real calm, relaxed, but then all of a sudden I kind of go into a little bit of a dream state. But the thing that really trips me out is that, I'm meditating, I'm in posture, but all of a sudden I start doing this, like I'm looking at something or I'm whatever I'm fantasizing about, my head starts going to it. So, but it was real good. I really appreciate it. Very relaxing. I really needed it today. So
Cool.
thank you.
Thanks, Mark. The next, there's two things I was thinking about as you were sharing. First of all, I had a similar experience. That's a great insight to notice that there's some shift. I also noticed like sometimes if I had future thought, I'd be leaning forward in my posture. And if I had like past thought, I would find myself leaning back sometimes.
Interesting.
So the next level of insight, if you want to take it here, is when you recognize that that's happening, check the thought. Is the thought a future thought or a past thought? Maybe left is future and right is past, or vice versa. I don't know, but there might be some correlation there too. And then instead of, and not instead, but just as an added moment of insight of like, oh, okay, so I can notice that there's this tendency. Is it, history? Am I kind of recalling some past, some replaying some old story or some old event, or am I looking to the future and replaying or fantasizing or moving into some kind of mystery of what might be, and then check. So there's that process, and then as you come back, just checking in with the body, kind of like center line. And just again, the whole thing with awareness. So what happens is that it becomes that nothing is outside of meditation. It's all the meditation. When you're, I'm thinking about the future. I'm thinking about, whatever, like next week, or, the refuge conference, or, when I see my friend, or, whatever, going on a trip or whatever it is, and just recognizing it, seeing it for what it is, thought, future, and then bringing the attention back and then checking it with the body and then noticing, is there some kind of feeling tone connected? Because there may or may not be I don't know, but just to keep those things.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, I'll definitely try to do that. Thank you so
Cool, Mark.
much.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing that. John, hands up.
Hey, John. Thanks, Mark, for sharing that. Actually, I have a very similar experience. Even just now, it's like seems like a dream kind of, but like my head, I almost like find myself like twitching. Um, but for me, it was like a past situation that I like found myself in.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I don't know, but like what you said makes sense. Just checking yourself and definitely going to be more mindful of that now when I find that happening.
Yeah, being mindful of thinking is very different than thinking. When we're mind, just same with with anger, with lust, with fear, with mindfulness of it allows us to have this observational view. And when we have an observational view, then we can gain insight.
Hmm.
And when we're just kind of locked in, then and we're kind of just moving through the whole process, then it's just happening. It's happening to us. We don't have any. There's no volition involved. So when we can, that's what's great about mindfulness. The Buddha said, and I think it's pretty good, that mindfulness is all helpful, and I agree.
For sure, me too. Thank you.
Yeah, and I actually, both of you mentioned something that I wanted to just kind of also touch on. So there's actually 4 states within mindfulness. Actually, there's pre-meditation, but the first is kind of like what we're doing, just kind of the busyness of the day, kind of rapidly moving through things, thinking about things, doing tasks, all that kind of thing. And it takes a few minutes for us to be able to kind of drop below that. And then there's this dreamy like state where often people start to feel sleepy, like they're going to fall asleep, right? And so this is it's like kind of second phase, and it's a little spacey. And a lot of times people think that's meditation and that's like the desired goal because it feels relaxing, which is good. And sometimes it is. Where sometimes we need a nap, like we just need to take a 15-minute nap or a power nap or something, and that's okay too. What Mark was talking about, and I'm not sure if this is true for you, John, but this kind of where you're like, it's kind of slightly dreamy, where it feels a little spacey, a little floaty, but you're still connected to the breath. You're still connected to the body. So
Yeah,
this is,
for sure.
yeah, no problems. This is all good. Keep going. The next phase, what they call theta. So I think it's alpha, beta, theta, delta. I think that's the brain waves that we're kind of moving through. And I could have them wrong because they're Greek and I don't know. But so alpha, beta, theta is that kind of where we start to kind of get some collecting of attention. There's some calm that's coming. There's some more awareness. And then that's usually about 20 minutes of meditation it takes to get to the theta waves. And that's kind of the sweet spot. And it's kind of like anything from there on. So is what they call the delta waves. Alpha, beta, theta, delta. Yeah. So the delta wave is like deep, conscious, insightful awareness. And so as I'm just giving you guys this description of feeling tones and being more receptive and opening to the feeling tones, there's a known and predictable course that can take place if we're just learning to just kind of focus the attention, sustain the attention, allow the calm to take place, allow the kind of sleepiness to be there without necessarily falling asleep. And even if that happens, I mean, when I was in this monastery in northern Thailand, I was with all these monks. I was in white. I was just on this like 25-day meditation retreat with all these monks, and I was meditating in this library, it was kind of cool in the middle of the day, so all the monks would go there to meditate. And I remember kind of falling asleep myself because it's like 3:00 in the afternoon in Thailand, so it's time for naps, and then seeing all these monks who I thought, these monks, they're monks, they totally know how to meditate, they're like floating, whatever, they got their shit together, and they were like, like nodding, they were fully on the nod, and I was like, oh, that was so validating for me because I was totally on the nod myself. So sleepiness is a state, and we can be aware of it, just like anxiety is a state, depression is a state. They're all different states of the mind. They're states of our awareness, and we can be aware of it or we can be caught in it. So just to say that, keep going.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Anything in the room? Please, Mike.
Thank everybody in Zoom for the reflections too. Thank you for the teaching. It's really striking a chord with me because my whole experience in the meditations, it felt like there was interconnectivity, not efforting or contesting or expecting it, having an expectation to be a certain way. Like you mentioned those stages, which I'd never heard of before, but I could relate to them because like you said, like at the beginning, going through a Rolodex and then dropping in and feeling extremely light, and then coming to a point where like I was thinking of family members and got emotional, and then in the past I think if something like that had happened, I would have contested it or judged instead of just letting it, like being mindful of it, just letting it be, like just being in the present moment, whatever was going on, just allowing it and letting it flow and observing it, and not judging or clinging or I just think what's happening now is everything feels there's like interconnectivity, and there was interconnectivity in this experience and in some on the run up to some of the meditations I've been doing as a play. So I felt like it was all like a conjoined, like interconnected experience, and that's just the reflection I have. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mike. It's so funny how, I don't know if it's funny, but it's interesting to me how disconnected we can feel throughout our days, disconnected from what we're doing, disconnected from our thoughts, disconnected from our bodies. How often are we actually connected to what is happening in this body throughout the day? Yet, and then you're mentioning like, okay, so we do this, we, spend 20 minutes or 30 minutes kind of focusing the attention, dropping in, and maybe there's other times, maybe it's, working out or yoga or surfing, or, there's other things that happen where we can feel connected for brief moments. But like, why isn't that just what's happening all the time? I mean, we're totally connected, you know what I mean? But, one of my teachers years ago said, Westerners, he's talking about Westerners because he had a bit of a judgment. But he was saying, Westerners have heads on top of their heads, right? We think about thinking about thinking, right? So there's so many levels of this kind of processing that's taking place. And we got 3 layers of our brain, right? And so we are, often up in the frontal cortex figuring things out. And when we drop down, we're literally dropping to different levels of the brain, which is also where the kind of theta waves, the alpha, beta, theta, delta come into play. But how when we do that, we start to feel more connected, more interconnected, not only to this body, but then others too. I mean, that's this whole other kind of experience that, I've dabbled with, so great. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. And that's absolutely what this is about, and feeling interconnected. Okay, so I'm going to transition. So bear with me here. Let me see. So last week I started what I thought was going to be a 3-part series, but it might end up being more. Really, it's a look at the precepts, but to take a broader, more kind of practical range in talking about sex, drugs, and money. 3 things that we often have a lot of attachment around, that we often have a lot of opinions about, that we often have perhaps judgment towards, whether that's like our own sexuality or sexuality in general, our sexual orientations or proclivities, or whatever it is. And then drugs, whether we partake or don't partake, whether we're addicted or not addicted, whether we're they're fucking awesome, or that they're, the bane of our existence. Where there's some kind of feeling about it, generally, And then money, and when I think of money, I think of money and power. And I also think of money, although power might be separate, but absolutely connected. I think of money, I think of, greediness versus kind of givingness or generosity. I think of our relationship to money, our relationship to not having enough, having too much. I was here the other day, and Noah was talking about the 31 planes of existence, and he was mentioning the jealous gods realm, and like somebody, or maybe he even said, like, we often live in America, or Western, or you call it first world country, whatever you want to, whatever you want to call it, live in the jealous gods realm, and then depending actually on your socioeconomic status, might be jealous gods, never enough, always, never good enough, or it might be, the hungry ghosts, right? Another example of never enough, but coming from it's not abundance, but it's scarcity. So this, like, it's just the opposite sides of the same coin. So I think about these concepts, and I talked last week about sex, and kind of gave the householder view and the monastic view. And for monastics, for nuns, for monks in the Theravadan tradition, it's pretty important to make this distinction, and I don't think I did last week, so I'm going to spend a little time on it. It's a vow of celibacy. The Buddha himself was basically like, lust is super powerful, so intense, desire for sexual gratification so intense that I had to totally renounce it. Otherwise, I would not have become awakened. I would not have become enlightened. And there's so much attachment to not only just that, like sex, but also relationship, right? And what we mean by love, and what is love, and what is what, for some people, love means completely being attached to that person. Like, what is non-attached, appreciative love? Like, what does that look like? Maybe that's the I think the best way I can think about it is that unconditional love, that maybe you can have with a friend or a cousin, or, not someone that's too complicated, right? Because, moms, dads, could be complicated, but there could still be some unconditional love there. Who knows? I don't know. Just reflecting, just like, as I said that, I was like, I had definitely some conditional love towards my mother before 25 or so. And then after that, and as I got more involved in this practice and had some healing with my mom, actually, before she died, it shifted to unconditional, non-attached, appreciative love. And so I think it's possible to evolve in some of these ways. But anyway, so for monastics in the Theravadan tradition, it's really just celibacy, right? No acts of kind of sexual acting out, which can be really challenging. As I've taken some time of celibacy myself, was really challenging because it's such a strong power, and we're so conditioned, depending on who you are. Some people they're maybe, more kind of maybe asexual and not necessarily feeling that certain drive, and others feel it very strongly. And so there's, lots of places in between. But so the Buddha was like, yeah, well, if you want to be a monk and you want to get enlightened, and you want to, then follow, this simple instruction, right? To be celibate, and practice hard, right? And the strongest form of kind of letting go. So let me just kind of broaden that out. So Theravadan Buddhist monasticism is this way. Just about every other aspect of Buddhist monasticism has some loophole. There's some leeway. In the Zen tradition, people can be Zen priests, yet they can still marry and they can live lay lives, but they're just kind of, for lack, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but something that they're called quasi-monastic, right? Because they're, they have jobs, they're buying houses, there's this kind of, not what the Buddha taught, but a later interpretation, adaptation, which worked and works. Maybe it's a good, still following precepts, still, dedicated practitioners. There's some very amazing Zen, not all, some Zen, like Suzuki Roshi, who brought, Zen Buddhism to America. He was a monastic, and he was a celibate, from best I understand. He might have also been an alcoholic too, but I'm not sure. I think that might be true. That's a different topic. But other traditions allow marriage. They allow, they allow some, like you can have some, it's not full celibacy, not full renunciation. So there's some kind of leeway within some of the different traditions, Chan and Vajrayanas, lamas, lamas get married. Sometimes lamas have a couple wives, to be honest, and maybe a concubine or two, right? Or a lover, we'll call them. So, lots of room for interpretation. And this is one of the major things that happened when, about 400 years after the Buddha died, people started to reinterpret some shit, right? They were like, well, this whole renunciation of a sex thing, like maybe what we're talking about is not, one's personal awakening and enlightenment, but actually being of service and developing the more of a compassionate heart mind is really the true goal of the Buddha's teaching. And so, we're going to kind of shift our attention to being more of service and humanitarian. This is kind of the Bodhisattva vow and kind of where that comes into play. So just to kind of broaden it out a little bit, and I'm not going to get into like, and this type of Buddhism does this and this type of Buddhism does that, but just to give a few examples of some of the differences. And then there's, okay, Buddhism in the West. Non-monastics like myself, householders, lay teachers, rampant in this country, right? Mostly in this country, and in Europe too, right? So then there's another layer of navigation, right? Because as holding the role as a Buddhist teacher, what does that look like? Maybe, not being celibate, but having a very clear ethical boundary of what's okay, what's not okay. There's some power there, some power differentiation. So important to kind of take that on. And sometimes it gets confusing. Not necessarily, it has been confusing for me at times in my own life, but getting more and more clear. It is a practice. It is a renunciation practice. And then as lay people, as householders, just in general, practitioners wanting to take on the precepts, well, the Buddha gave 5, and all of the 227 male monastic precepts and the 331 female bhikkhuni or female monastic precepts are built off of the 5. They're just more they're more kind of differentiated or distinguishable about these other little things that happen. I just think, useful to kind of see that, and that's a choice that monastics take on, and interesting to take them on. It's actually interesting when I was in Burma. I had already studied the Vinaya. I knew the majority I'd been around monks for a long time. But when I went to go ordain, full ordination, I had a kind of a novice ordination in Thailand, where I just took 10 precepts, which basically was anything fun. That was all the fun stuff was out, and it was all just the other, I don't even know what's in the 217 other ones, But when I went to go full ordination in Burma, I went through the whole ceremony and everything. Almost nobody spoke English, first of all, and then the ones that did. But they didn't say anything to me about. They were just basically like, "You're here. This is what you're doing. Follow the other guy in the robe, and you'll be okay." That's pretty much what they did. They didn't give me like, this is the list of rules and you got to sign a contract or nothing like that. It was like, they chanted and rang some bells and, hand me some robes. And I went and dressed in some robes and came back out. And then I had to like, okay, now I'm a monk, like figure it out. I knew how to meditate, but I didn't really know, what else I was going to do. And yeah, so anyway, just like the nuances of that. I guess I also want to say about that is I remember putting on the robes and like walking through, like the grounds for the first time. And I felt like I now had to represent the robes. There was something that shifted in me where I took on this role and I had to, there was an obligation to hold true to the Buddhist teaching. Like that's what I had to do. It was an interesting, just the act, knowing nothing about what the rules were or anything, just the act of doing that. There was a real noticeable shift. So I'm glad that I had that experience. So the 5 basic precepts, no killing, no taking life, not intentionally causing harm to other beings, falls in line with sex. No intentionally causing harm with your sexual energy, with sexual acts, with whatever, abuse, rape, harm, in any one of those ways, right? To not be deceitful or lie. So to be honest and open and clear, right, about intention. So I think it all falls in line with how do we have integrity, right? To refrain from sexual misconduct, right? So this idea of not abusing relationships, not manipulating around sex and sexual acts. And I've failed at that. Who hasn't? Who hasn't failed at that? Sometimes people have a bit of I don't think this happens with me, but I have seen it happen. People have a different view of teachers that sometimes we're somehow different. Like, no, I'm a dirty drug addict that smoked crack and robbed people. You know what I mean? Like, and I've been a monk. You know what I mean? But I have caused harm with my sexuality. I have stolen. I have lied. I've done all that. I used to steal for a living. That's what I did. And I say that not to be boastful, but just to like humanize. And that the important thing about precepts, I think, are that we learn and grow. And that when we cross our own internal boundary or the ideal of the Buddhist path, and we will make mistakes, I still get angry sometimes, I'm not like beyond anger. Matter of fact, that's something I hate about Buddhism. The American Western kind of idealized new agey Buddhism is like, Buddhists aren't supposed to be angry. Well, I'm a bad fucking Buddhist then because I get pissed, not at all as angry as I used to get, right? 20 years ago, I'm not kicking in windows and I'm not acting out in angry, aggressive ways, but it still comes up because I'm human, but the precepts are a guide and a guard for ourselves and for others. You get, I don't have one on now, but yeah, oftentimes you go on a retreat, you'll get it, you'll chant the precepts and you'll chant the refuges, and then you'll get a tie and you'll tie it around your wrist, right? And the idea is like, oh, it's it's a symbol of impermanence, but it's actually, they're called protection cords. And the reason they're called protection cords is because they're protecting you from you, or they're a reminder that you've taken these precepts and that your job is actually to protect everyone else from you, from your could be unskillful states of mind. So I think it's important to talk about these kinds of things. Sex in my mind, I'm embarrassed to say this, but the Salt and Pepper song of "Let's Talk About Sex, Baby" has been in my mind like all week. But I'm not going to sing it like Salt and Pepper because, you know, I'm too cool for that. Anyway, what else? So sexual misconduct from a, you know, lay or householder position, there's the traditional, which is, you know, to not have sex with children, to not, you know, covet another's wife, you know, in other words, to have sex with someone outside of their marriage, to, you know, anyone that's betrothed or promised to another. So to not, you know, to not be a squirrely person, you know, to have integrity around your sex and sexual energy. And I feel like that's really useful. And especially I like to think about it as wise sexual energy. And how often when even just in a little interaction or like a work interaction, or when you're first meeting with someone, do we lead with our sexuality as a performance or as an impression or as a flirt or as a something that is about notice me, recognize me, and usually, and how much of it also is about validation for ourselves, right? Men, women, you know, regardless of gender identity, you know, just to kind of see that, you know, kind of recognize that for ourselves. I think that's also what's asked of us in this kind of be wise with your sexuality, you know. Trying to think if there's anything else that I was gonna. Oh, well, and then the last thing, again, which goes back to the ahimsa, the first precept, which is about non-harming. So using substances in a heedless way, or that in a way that clouds the mind. So this is not to say necessarily prescription drugs, but drugs that, you know, intoxicate the mind. So add intoxicate the mind and unwise sexuality together. And what we're talking about generally is trauma, right? Whether it's self-induced, whether it's other people's, you know, there's just so much harm that's caused in these areas. You know, who hasn't been harmed by sex? Who hasn't harmed themselves around sexual acting out or repression, or, you know, there's just so many nuances to it. And so the idea of like, okay, how do we talk about sex, sexuality, being in relationship with another in a responsible way? And I'm not talking about just monogamy. Like, that's not what I'm saying. And some Puritans will say that's what it means. It means only being married in a monogamous relationship. But we don't really subscribe to that here, because there's way more nuance than that. You know, that's heteronormative, first of all. It's cisgendered, right? I mean, there's just so much that's just not okay about it. That's patriarchal and hierarchical and just bullshit. That there's so much more nuance to it. And that, does that mean that a ethically non-monogamous relationship is unwise sexuality? I don't know. Polyamory, unwise? I think that following the precepts and being clear about, okay, with the, you know, the third precept around being wise with your sexuality, like, what does that really look like? You know, that to me, the way I described it, you know, not intentionally causing harm, not setting out to cause harm, being wise and careful with your energy, being open and clear about what that means. And for some people, it might mean monogamy, and that's the way to go. And for some people, it might be, you know, polyamory or open, or whatever the, you know, whatever the array, the spectrum of what that might look like. But I think to be non-deceptive, to be honest, to be clear, to be open, just like all other aspects of Buddhism is asking us to do, and just apply that to sex. Pretty simple, really, but super fucking hard to do. It takes work. So I'll get more into, I'm thinking I missed one. Did I miss one? Oh, false speech. Oh yeah, wise speech. Kind of forgot that one. That's the fourth, right? Again, not talking about others. All the labels of like slut or whatever, all that kind of shaming that can happen around language. Let's not do that. Let's not gossip. Hard to do sometimes. Let's be wise and skillful with our speech as much as possible, knowing that we're probably going to blow it, especially this one, right? And how can we do that and then learn from that? That's where, in some ways, the Buddha kind of gave this like, okay, these are the 5 precepts for ethical integrity. And you can follow them to the degree in which you want to end your own suffering. Here's on one side is one spectrum, and complete heedlessness over here. Don't do anything I say. Just try to meditate and break every precept and see what happens. But if you want to end your own suffering, you might want to think about following these basic guidelines. Don't be an asshole. Don't hurt people. Don't use drugs and alcohol to the point where you're going to cause any harm for yourself or others. And or better off, it really is abstain from intoxicants and harmful drugs. That's the bottom line. And there's another nuance with that, which I'll end here and then lead with this next week, where here in the States, there's a lot of loopholes around that. What does that mean? A glass of wine every now and again is okay. A little medical marijuana is cool. Just going on a peyote trip for spiritual purposes. I have a funny story about that, which I won't get into right now, because you'll have to come back next week for my my ayahuasca debate around Buddhism and ayahuasca, which is a thing now. There's people that are like, they're going to Peru, but they're doing it as a Buddhist group, and then they're going on an ayahuasca trip, and then they're meditating and they're puking and then meditating. I don't know, maybe having sex. I have no idea what's going on, right? But it's not what the Buddha taught. That's what I know. All right, so we'll leave it there for this topic and open up for thoughts, questions, reflections. And we'll start with those of you in the room, in the Zoom, and you guys just raise your hand if you have any thoughts, questions, reflections. I know you have some thoughts.
So many thoughts.
I know you have some reflections.
So many. I love this topic.
Great, talk about it.
I love this topic because I think it's something that we don't talk about enough. And I think that as a culture, we have so much shame around sexuality. And there's just, it's like you said, here's a list of things we should not do. And I think it goes both ways as well, like men, women, people that are non-binary. It's all of us. We've all screwed up and hurt people with sex, and we've all made bad choices. And I just like how you really handled this topic and how I've enjoyed this. That's all I really have.
I think that's the next book. Sex from a Buddhist perspective. We have you were just giving the hands? Okay. You went like this, I don't know.
No, I think it's just, I think it's actually a great idea. I don't know if he was serious or not, but
No, I was saying someone should write the book around sex and Buddhism.
I thought you meant it was going to be you.
It's probably not going to be me. There you go. Shannon, you're on. You're up.
It'll be
There you go. All right, Mark.
Yeah, I want to thank you for this talk as well. This started back for me back in 2012 when I got sober at that time. I took that suggestion in the program of, staying out of relationships for the first year as to work on myself and, not have meaningless sex or, hurt somebody, because somebody's feelings always get involved in it, regardless if it's you or the other person, that you could hurt somebody that way. And I started my celibacy back then. I haven't been in a long-term relationship since prior to that. And so, I'm putting it out here, kind of, blowing my anonymity, but I've been pretty celibate as far as since 2012. And it hasn't been that difficult. There's been a couple times where I have, partaken, but it's not something like it was where I'm not out looking for it. There's been times where I've refused it for the, my well-being and for the other person. Something I didn't want to do, just, like, sorry, I don't have sex on the first date, maybe next time, that type of thing, do it in a kind of a skillful way without saying that I was celibate and things like that. But it's been very relieving not to have that as part of my life, as something like, once it happens, that maybe I start clinging to that person because I enjoyed it so much, and it's maybe not looking to be in a relationship with that person. So why do that? You know what I mean? And so it's been very beneficial in my life, and it goes right along, started off in the program and it moves right along into my practice. And it's been something that's very beneficial to me. And don't feel like I'm missing out at all, to tell you the truth, but I am kind of old as well. And I had my heyday, when I was that guy, I mean, it was like, it was, yeah,
Thank
it was, you know what I'm saying? But
I know what you're
anyway,
saying.
I just want to thank you for the talk, and I can totally relate to it and let know that's been beneficial for me.
Cool.
And do me a favor and give Michael and Shannon a hug for me. I'm sorry I can't be there to go out with you guys tonight.
No worries. Yeah, and I will.
All right, thank you.
All right. So we're just about out of time. So you have to come back next week for another installment of Sex, Drugs, and Money, the Buddhist perspective. Really the Jason Murphy perspective, but, closely related to Buddhism. And yeah. I feel like this is actually a topic, I just want to say, I feel like this is actually a topic that I avoided talking about for years because of just the different stigma, and I was new into Buddhism, and I felt like there was, certain things you could talk about and certain things that no teachers ever talked about. And we like to shake things up here at Against the Stream and talk about shit that people don't talk about, like BDSM lifestyle and Buddhism. But that happened. We did that for a while. We had a series about that. Anyway. So with that, I'm just going to say a few things. So Against the Stream is a, it's a nonprofit. We subsist only on the donations of those who attend. And we have, it's like a $3,500 a month rent here for this center, plus all the other expenses and whatnot. So you can donate if you'd like at againstthestream.com or againstthestream/donate.com, or just go to againstthestream.com and click the donate button, or at Against the Stream Meditation on Venmo. You can also send some money there. And if you're in the room, there's a bowl. You can donate there if you feel inclined, or find a way to be of service, be of service in some way. Come early, help us clean up. I don't know what you could do. You could, come to one of our events, support us there. However it works out. We're definitely, none of us are getting rich off ringing the bells. But anyway, may any goodness that comes from our practice, may this goodness be dedicated to the freedom from suffering for all beings. May all beings everywhere free themselves from suffering. May we all do the work necessary to find freedom.